discover the amazing moment I found my daughter and grandson sleeping in the car after being REV. James parked his truck outside the diner, exhaustion settling heavily on his shoulders. After another grueling day spent covered in grease, fixing the cars that rolled into his shop like clockwork, he was just trying to keep afloat in a town where the factories long ago closed their doors. Alone with his thoughts, the weight of economic despair crushed him. He fought against the tide, against the bitterness that surrounded him like a thick fog, desperate to keep hope alive. But as he stepped out, something caught his eye. A beat-up old Chevy, its faded paint whispering tales of a better past. His heart leapt at the sight. He recognized it instantly. It was Sarah's. As he approached, the sounds of the diner, the clattering of dishes, anxious laughter, faded into a distant hum. He peered into the Chevy, and there they were. Sarah and his little grandson Tommy, wrapped in cozy blankets, their soft breaths reminding him of the warmth they once shared. Joy surged inside him, but it intertwined with a sharp pang of regret. Years of silence strung between them like a taut wire. He could almost hear echoes of family dinners, laughter that had turned into awkward silences. Had it really come to this? Sinking down onto the pavement beside the car, he felt the weight of his choices. His instinct had always been to work hard, instilling the very values that had once driven them apart. Days turned to years where survival was prioritized over connection. Each moment spent chasing dreams had pushed Sarah further away. And now, a chance encounter. Could it be the catalyst for mending their fractured bond, or would it reveal just how irreparable their relationship had become? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just as a fragile hope began to bloom, a soft knock inside the car shattered the stillness. Sarah blinked awake. Their eyes met, and the warmth that once existed between them was veiled by a layer of hurt. In that moment, James felt the bite of shame root itself deep in his chest, the hurt of the years lost tugging at him. The bitter aftertaste of guilt mixed with a longing to reach out, to tell her how much he missed her, how much they could still salvage. But fear tied his tongue, binding the words he ached to say. Then Tommy cooed, breaking through the charged air, drawing a soft smile from Sarah. It was like seeing a glimmer of light through thick clouds, but as quickly as it appeared, it faded when Sarah turned away. "You left us," she said, voice raw with old wounds. Each word felt like a kick to his gut. Abandonment. The accusation hung between them like the bitter chill of the night air. With each retort, their exchange spiraled, the dark parts of their past surfacing like ghosts eager to haunt them. James felt trapped, torn between the instinct to defend himself and the yearning to pull them into an embrace. The night thickened, but within that darkness lay an ember of possibility, the kind that bore the promise of healing if only they could confront their ghosts. Would the courage to speak the truth come in the form of shattered edges that had once defined their family? With every moment hanging precariously in the air, James wrestled with the horrifying thought that he might lose them all over again, leaving him in deeper loneliness than before. Could he find the strength to face this brutal reality? The tension hung like an unyielding weight as James sat cross-legged on the cold ground, the gravel digging into his knees. The air, thick with unspoken words, crackled with a desperate expectation. His heart galloped, pounding against his ribcage in a rhythm that mirrored his conflicted thoughts. Here he was, facing the very consequence of years spent lost in his own ambition, and the recognition of that truth held a chisel sharp enough to carve away the facade he had so meticulously built. "Sarah," he finally managed, the syllables stretching out as if they were swimming against a current. I never meant for it to come to this. His voice, roughened by time and regret, barely broke through the fortress she had built around her heart. He dared to hope she would hear the sincerity beneath, that perhaps they could peel back the layers together. She turned her gaze, green eyes glimmering with a mix of anger and pain, a reflection of her own battle. What did you mean for it to be, Dad? Just work? You threw yourself into everything else, and where did that leave us? Each question was a stake pressed into his chest, yet he felt his stomach knot with a mix of shame and resolve. James had thought that focus on work would create stability, but what he hadn't reckoned with was the emotional cost. Every hour spent installing engines or fixing suspensions had drawn a deeper divide in his family. He had chased after financial security at the expense of connection, and now that reality stared him in the face with the sharp clarity of a cold winter morning. I thought if I worked harder. He started but faltered, the lie unsatisfying in the space between them. He swallowed hard, focusing on the truth. I thought I'd provide for you both. I thought it would matter more than any moment spent together. Sarah's expression softened for a heartbeat, caught between understanding and denial. All that matters now is the present, Dad. You can't just say you want to change, you have to prove it. Those words lingered, echoing like a judge's gavel against the silence that followed. He felt something flicker within him, a spark of determination, fighting to rise above the remnants of his past mistakes. It was time for action, not just words. What can I do? He asked, the vulnerability unraveling the mask he so often wore. The stark idea that his journey back to them had to start from a place of recognition, acknowledgement, and repair settled gently in his mind. Be here, be present, for Tommy, for me. Show me you want this, she replied, the vulnerability in her voice drawing James closer to the crux of their reality. Each syllable pressed against him, igniting a resolve deep within, a commitment far greater than mere promises. Okay, he breathed, searching her face for understanding. It was only a beginning, a fragile promise, but from it he could sense the potential for rebuilding what once was. A passing car illuminated their faces briefly, casting shadows that danced across the gaps in their relationship. Shadows he longed to fill with honesty and hope. He would learn to tune out the noise that defined his past, listening instead to what Sarah and Tommy needed from him now. They were the lifeline he could no longer afford to cut. Let's start now, he suggested, a tentative smile breaking the gloom. The moment felt immutable, a threshold crossed in the aching dark that defined them. But just as their eyes locked, something shifted. A faint rustling emerged from the shadows, and a figure appeared, a tall man, raw and unkempt, with anger glinting in his eyes. James felt the air shift, currents of tension rushing back. Uninvited, the presence diverged sharply from the healing moment they had begun to forge. Could he maintain resolve against this new adversary? The confrontation had come to his door, and he would need to stand not only for himself, but for his family. The time had indeed come to face not only the specters of his past, but the external threats to their fragile reconciliation. The tall man stepped closer, the anger radiating off him like waves of heat. James held his breath, assessing this new variable in the fragile equation he was trying to balance. A chance at redemption and reconnection with Sarah, and now this unexpected confrontation. His instincts screamed at him to retreat, but retreating was no longer an option. Not today. "Who the hell are you?" the stranger barked, his gaze flickering between James and Sarah. James quickly stood, positioning himself before Sarah as if he could block the ensuing storm. "I'm her father," he asserted, the words feeling foreign yet powerful on his tongue. They were a declaration of his newfound commitment, an unwillingness to surrender the relationship he had neglected for so long. The man scowled, his fists clenching at his sides, betrayal etched across his face. "You're the one who abandoned her. You think you can just come back now and—" "How do you know anything about me?" James interrupted, his voice steadier than he felt. Each word required courage, every syllable a calculated choice to confront the consequences of his past. "I understand I haven't been there, but I'm trying to change, for my daughter and grandson." A flicker of disbelief crossed the man's face, yet beneath it lay a layer of concern. "You think that makes it okay? You think that's enough?" James clenched his teeth, bolstered by a dawning realization. He had spent too long justifying his choices, and now he needed to embrace the fallout. "I know it's not, but I'm here now. I want to be a father again. I want to stand for my family." The man took a step back, caught off guard. "You don't get to just claim family when you've avoided responsibility. She's been through hell without you." His words hit James like icy water. He could sense his body reacting, flushing cheeks, an aching chest, but within that turmoil, a clarity unveiled itself. What was he really willing to fight for? "Tell me how to fix this," James demanded, desperation edging his voice. He felt the resolve swell within him, each heartbeat whispering urgency into the stillness of their standoff. "If Sarah has suffered, I will do whatever it takes to make it right. Just let me try." The boundary between them softened, the tall man's expression flickering from anger to something that resembled cautious curiosity. "You really think you can just waltz back into her life and act like nothing happened?" "No, and I'm not going to act," James replied, the truth carrying his conviction. "I'll prove my worthiness every day, but I can't do it alone." The moment lingered, tense. The stranger's eyes narrowed, examining the sincerity beneath James's words. "It's not just about you showing up. It's about earning her trust. You want a fresh start? You better be ready for the work it demands." "I'm ready," James replied, soul laid bare. "This isn't just about me anymore. I want to show her that I can be someone she needs and deserves." The man considered this, the edges of his anger fraying. Suddenly, as if the universe had opened a door where there had once been a wall, he stepped closer. "All right, but know this, I'll be watching you. You slip up even once, and I won't give you a second chance. Not while she's still healing." James nodded, a newfound responsibility lifting some of the crushing weight from his shoulders. "I understand, and I will respect that." Just then, from the corner of his eye, he spotted movement in the shadows. His heart leapt as he realized it was Tommy, the small figure just emerging from the rear of the car, confused by the tension unfolding before him. James steeled himself, ready to face not only his past, but the responsibility of protecting his family's future. He knew their reconciliation hinged on every choice ahead, and where that road would lead was uncertain. Yet one thing was clear. The journey towards a better version of himself had to begin now. As Tommy approached, looking between James and Sarah, the fragile life they could build hung in the balance. Would he have the strength to guide them through this tangled web of strained relationships, or would his past failures come crashing down once more? The reality of this second chance pressed in on him, both exhilarating and terrifying. But there was no time for doubt. He straightened his posture, ready for whatever came next. What would this confrontation truly mean for their lives moving forward? James felt the weight of uncertainty as Tommy shuffled closer, rubbing his eyes and yawning innocently. The boy hadn't yet grasped the tension hanging in the air, but James could feel it pressing more heavily with each passing second. This was not the environment he wanted to bring his son into, yet it was the reality he must face. The ugly truth of his absence, and the damage it had wrought on Sarah and Tommy. "Dad!" Tommy's voice broke through the silence that had enveloped them, drawing the attention of both men. There was a slight quiver in the boy's tone, revealing his trepidation at seeing his father in confrontation. "What's wrong?" In that moment, James understood that this was not solely about reconciling with Sarah, nor was it about proving himself to her father. It was about setting an example for Tommy, showing him how to confront adversity with courage. He couldn't afford to waver now. He took a step back, positioning himself in a way that shielded his son from their heated exchange. "Nothing's wrong, buddy. Just some grown-up talk," James said, forcing a calmness into his voice that he didn't quite feel. He glanced at Sarah, her face a mixture of apprehension and hope. Would she see through his bluster? Would she allow him to prove that the man she once loved could surface again? The tall man, still simmering with hostility, crossed his arms, assessing the family dynamic with a critical eye. "You're introducing your son to chaos," he remarked sharply, the bitterness flavoring his words. "You may think you can change, but the real test is yet to come." Those words hung in the air like a weight upon James's chest. The real test, indeed. He was acutely aware that while his desire to change was strong, actions needed to follow through, to match his intentions with undeniable evidence of growth. The looming specter of failure taunted him, but in the line of scrutiny laid an opportunity for transformation. "Tommy, why don't you go play in the back seat for a moment?" James suggested gently, not wanting to send the boy away, but realizing the conversation ahead was bubbling with issues a child shouldn't witness. As Tommy nodded and turned away, James's heart sank. This felt like another instance of retreat, another step that could alienate him from his son further. As the boy entered the car, the tall man took a step closer, his eyes locked onto James's. "Do you truly believe you can rebuild a relationship with your daughter and grandson after everything? They will be watching your every move." James swallowed hard. A mixture of fear and determination surged within him. "Not just them. The world will be watching. But if I don't try, I'll never know what I'm capable of. I want them to see a man who learns from his mistakes and strives to become a source of strength." The man's steely gaze held him in place. He wasn't convinced yet. "Strength? You've defined that word so loosely in the past. Strength is not merely an illusion of presence. It requires daily action." James nodded, choking back his frustration. He knew this was a test of mettle, a gauntlet to traverse if he hoped to secure any measure of trust and respect. "Then I'll prove it," he replied firmly, surprising even himself at the certainty in his voice. "I'll show up day after day. I promise you that." "Promises mean nothing unless they're followed by actions," the man countered, but a slight softening of his features gave James a sliver of hope. And then, as if the universe allowed some cosmic chance for redemption, Sarah quietly broke in, standing next to her father with an unreadable expression. "Maybe it's time you both had a moment to understand each other. What you both want is the same. A better future for me and Tommy." James looked at her, the sheer vulnerability in her eyes grounding him. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Sarah's healing, about what he could do to foster trust, to demonstrate every day that he was committed to their family. "Let's talk. Let's figure this out together," he offered, his heart racing. The challenge laid out before him was steep, but as the three of them stood together, he felt an undeniable pull toward the future. In the hour that followed, they would all discover just how steep that climb truly was. Would he be able to bridge the chasm formed by his past transgressions, or would old wounds spiral him back into the darkness he was trying to leave behind? The stakes had never been higher, and the moment for taking action had arrived. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the asphalt as James prepared himself to confront Sarah and her father. Once again, he was at a crossroads, but this time he felt something different. The pounding of his heart was no longer just anxiety. It was anticipation, a stirring ember of hope. "Okay, let's get down to it," he said, forcing himself to take a deep breath. The weight of their history filled the space around him, the broken promises, the tears, the lost time. Confronting any of this would require immense courage. "What do we need to address?" Sarah's father, a sentinel of skepticism, opened his mouth to speak, but Sarah interrupted him. "Maybe we should start with why this matters, why it matters to you, James." Her eyes were piercing, searching for authenticity in his response. James cast a glance toward the car where Tommy sat, blissfully unaware of the swirling emotions outside. I want to be the man Tommy deserves. I don't want him to grow up feeling abandoned or ashamed. I've been wrestling with those feelings myself. There was a moment of silence, the kind that holds the weight of unspoken thoughts. James felt the pressure mount. He could either evaporate into nothingness or stand firm and confront what loomed ahead. It's not just about being present physically, he continued, veering his gaze between Sarah and her father. It's about being present emotionally. I want to be real for him, not just a shadow of who I used to be. Her father stepped forward, skepticism etched in his furrowed brow. Do you really know what that entails? Being real requires admitting your flaws publicly, not just privately. Are you ready for that? James met the older man's gaze with newfound conviction. Yes, I am. I know I've disappointed you all, but I also believe I can change. The question is whether you're willing to see that change happen. Now, more than ever, he realized that this was about accountability, not only for himself, but to Sarah and Tommy. The churning doubts within begged for validation, but he refused to allow them to overshadow his desire to grow. Change doesn't happen overnight, Sarah interjected softly, an expression of cautious hope on her face. But if you're willing, there are steps we can take together. What are you suggesting? James asked, feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. We could start with weekly family dinners, just the three of us, maybe even add some family activities. Small gestures that build trust, she proposed. As he processed her words, a sense of clarity washed over him. He liked the idea. It was tangible. I can commit to that. I'll show up every week. I'll cook if I have to. Anything that allows us to rebuild. Her father cleared his throat, and James braced himself for the continued scrutiny. That's a start, but actions speak louder than words. You need to prove this isn't just a phase. The challenge simmered between them, an unspoken agreement that the road ahead would be anything but easy. Do you know what that entails? Sarah's father pressed again. The reckoning doesn't end with dinner invitations. I'm prepared for that, James asserted, the heat of determination climbing within him. I want to take ownership, not just today, but every day thereafter. I expect that it won't be easy, but I'm up for it. For the first time, he saw a flicker of something in her father's eyes, perhaps acceptance. The weight of the situation seemed to lift, though a sense of urgency crackled in the air. Fine, the man replied, though he remained cautious. But understand this, every act of kindness must be rooted in honesty and introspection. Only then can you create a path to redemption. James nodded, aware that the likelihood of success hinged on unwavering sincerity. The commitment to growth would require unflinching self-reflection, prodding into the corners of his past he'd avoided. Then let's make this count, he said, feeling as though he stood on the precipice of something profound. As they finalized their tentative plan, he couldn't help but sense that this journey held all the potential for new chapters, ones yet unwritten in the story of their family. But just as he began to envision their path, something drew his gaze back to the car. There, in the soft glow of the evening sun, Tommy had fallen asleep, looking so peaceful and unguarded. A sudden realization flashed through James. This was the future he was reclaiming, step by unsteady step. His heart raced again, a blend of fear and fierce determination flooding through him. The moment of truth had arrived, and he felt every ounce of potential tinged with the awareness of how easily past mistakes could resurface. What would happen next? The real test yet to come loomed ever closer. The sun dipped further below the horizon as James's mind spun with the enormity of what lay ahead. He turned away from the car, the warmth of Tommy's innocent slumber starkly contrasting the emotional tempest brewing within. "Let's make this work," he said again. But the words felt strangely hollow, as if the gravity of commitment rested solely on his shoulders. What came next was an unforgiving landscape of obstacles that had yet to be defined. He felt the gaze of Sarah's father weighing heavy on him, the scrutiny an unresolved chord that threatened to pull him back into a cycle of self-doubt. James squared his shoulders, attempting to match the man's intensity. The stakes had never been higher, not just for him, but for the fragile foundation he sought to build for Tommy. "Let's schedule our first dinner then," Sarah suggested, pulling him from his spiraling thoughts. "How about Friday? It gives us all time to prepare." "Friday works," he replied, though inside he was calculating the hours of preparation necessary to create an inviting atmosphere, one that might peel away layers of their past distrust. As they parted ways, he felt the anticipation mingle with apprehension. What if he faltered? What if Friday morphed into a battleground of past grievances rather than the oasis of hope he envisioned? The next few days stretched out ahead like an uncharted map. He busied himself in the kitchen, attempting to conquer the art of cooking. Each simmering pot brought a sense of accomplishment mixed with a tinge of dread. The culinary adventure was not simply about preparing a meal. It symbolized a new chapter, a tangible representation of his commitment to change. As he diced vegetables, James confronted the thoughts that arose with each chop. Cooking reminded him of the stability he had long surrendered to uncertainty. Memories of family dinners around a table flooded back, joyful laughter drowned out by the suffocating weight of guilt. For years he had avoided domesticity, associating it with failure. Yet here he was, desperately trying to reclaim a semblance of that happiness. On the morning of that fateful Friday, the nerves hit him like a freight train. He stood before the bathroom mirror, scrutinizing the reflection staring back at him. Who was he trying to become? He couldn't shake off the doubts. They lingered like the stale smells of regret. "Just breathe," he muttered, steadying himself. His desire to be present for Tommy overcame the clamoring fears. As he drove to pick up Sarah and her father, his grip tightened on the steering wheel, a physical representation of his resolve. Upon arrival, their home felt alien, almost an adversary, a fortress of skepticism surrounded by emotional walls. Yet he stepped inside, the scent of the cuisine wafting toward him as if beckoning for acceptance. Family gatherings, once a source of comfort, felt daunting now. He had no idea how Sarah's father would react to his efforts, and that fear nagged at him like a persistent itch. Would they recognize his dedication, or would skepticism stain the evening? As evening descended, the table was set, a feast made with care and intention. James conjured a semblance of confidence, grounding himself in the nourishment laid out before them. Family dinner was not merely a meal. This was a proving ground. With every smile exchanged, he felt a delicate shift in the atmosphere, a tentative, not quite familiarity blossoming amidst the tension. Yet he couldn't ignore the opportunity that lingered just outside. Hope for his son's future, a chance for reconciliation. As they began to eat, an echo of laughter arose, mingling with the clinking of utensils. It felt genuine, yet just below the surface, an unspoken note of caution pervaded the mood. "Let's talk about what it means to be real," Sarah's father suddenly interjected, gaze locking onto James with a fervor that sent an ice-cold jab through him. The challenge was back. The reckoning had only just begun. James took a deep breath, preparing to dive into the depths of his vulnerabilities. What would he uncover in himself, and what consequences would follow? The moment of truth waited ahead like an unyielding tide, ready to swallow him whole. James felt the air thicken with tension as he met the unwavering gaze of Sarah's father. The man's words hung in the space between them, vibrating with scrutiny. To define real was to redefine what lay buried beneath the surface for James, a discourse necessitating frankness and self-exposure he had long since avoided. It was now or never. "I think being real means being honest," James said, choosing his words carefully as he attempted to navigate the conversation. Honestly, I've struggled with that. I've avoided real connections because fear consumed me. But for Tommy, I want to build something more authentic. His own words took him by surprise, releasing a flood of emotions he hadn't anticipated. Would they resonate with Sarah's father, or would they merely amplify the pre-existing doubts? Honesty, huh? Sarah's father replied, a sardonic twist playing at the corners of his mouth. Are you sure you mean that? Sometimes the truth hurts more than the lies we tell ourselves. A weight lodged itself in James's throat. He recognized the challenge, one he must meet head-on to salvage the fragments of his burgeoning family. You're right, the truth can hurt. But I'm committed to facing that pain. For Tommy. For us. The initial silence that followed struck James as an expanse loaded with unspoken judgments and unacknowledged revelations. Sarah shifted in her seat, her hopeful gaze darting between the two men as if urging James to pierce through the fog enveloping their dialogue. The conversation morphed into an exploration of regrets, dreams unfulfilled, and expectations shattered. James found himself peeling back layers, his heart racing with each internal challenge laid bare. He recalled nights spent wrestling with his shortcomings, when sleep eluded him, and the never-ending cycle of self-recrimination held him hostage. I've made mistakes, but I'm not those mistakes, he asserted, conviction building within him. Every day, I'm trying to be a better man for Tommy, to give him the stability I never had. Stability? Sarah's father continued, his tone softer now, but the underlying skepticism remained. It sounds nice, James, but it's a lot harder to achieve and maintain in real life. James absorbed the rebuke without retaliation, focusing instead on regrouping his self-assurance. I know it'll be a long road. The shadows of my past linger, but I'm learning to confront them. This is the first step. Each syllable ignited desire for growth. Relinquishing the burden of his past was a mission he needed to win. As the conversation evolved, James began to identify glimpses of shared anxieties in the older man's expressions. There was something unyielding in his posture, too, an emblem of an old warrior, unwilling to submit to the vulnerability James so desperately sought to embrace. Perhaps that was the bridge he needed to build. Look, James ventured, heart hammering. If we're going to make any of this work, we'll need to start with vulnerability. Isn't that the essence of family? It's messy, but if we come together, we can change the narrative. Moments stretched into what felt like hours as Sarah's father considered his words. The tension that once felt like an anchor loosened imperceptibly, illuminating a potential for dialogue. Maybe, he finally said, a faint glimmer of acceptance crossing his features. But trust is earned, and you have a long way to go. James knew the road ahead would be fraught with skepticism and grief, yet for the first time, the potential for a shared future shimmered faintly on the horizon. He recognized he was embarking on a pivotal journey, not solely for Tommy, but for himself as well. As the meal wound down, James's mind swirled with anticipation for the next steps. There was so much left to convey, so many facets of his identity still under construction. Just as laughter echoed once more and spirits lightened, James's heart dropped as he locked eyes with Sarah's father. But tell me this, the older man said, brow furrowing. Are you truly ready to face what being real demands? Because that might be the hardest thing you'll ever do. The words echoed, a bold challenge that would either pave the way for empowerment or pull James deeper into a chasm of uncertainty. Would he be able to confront the complexities of his identity and family, the core of who he was becoming? The answer lingered like uncharted territory in James's mind, an urgency emerging. James felt the weight of Sarah's father's question more keenly than ever, reverberating within the chambers of his mind. It wasn't just an inquiry, it was a challenge wrapped in skepticism. He had spent too long skirting around the truth, But now, in the face of uncertainty, he realized he had a choice to make. "Am I ready?" he pondered, an internal battle taking root. What did being real truly demand? He found himself grappling not just with the concept, but the emotional toll it would require of him. The path forward wasn't merely about seizing control over his identity. It was about confronting the multifaceted aspects of who he was, the man driven by fear, regret, but also hope. After dinner, James stepped outside, the crisp evening air sharpening his senses. He needed space to breathe, to process. The fading sunlight silhouetted the horizon, casting elongated shadows that mirrored the past he aimed to shake off. He leaned against the side of the house, heart racing. With each breath, he wrestled with the ghosts of his mistakes. Every opportunity missed, every moment wasted in self-doubt. The conversations replayed in his mind like an old recording, punctuated by Sarah's father's doubts and defenses. Trust is earned, and you have a long way to go. But what if earning that trust took more than just time? What if it demanded exposure to the very fears that had held him captive? This realization triggered a shift. Could vulnerability be his strongest asset? The idea was daunting, and yet it glimmered with potential, shimmering on the edges of his consciousness like a distant beacon. He closed his eyes, envisioning the conversations he needed to have. With Sarah, with Tommy, and yes, even with himself. It was about breaking the cycle of avoidance he had perpetuated for too long. Could he articulate the tangled feelings surrounding his inadequacies? The stakes felt monumental, but retreating was not an option. He started to visualize the support system he could create, a web of honesty instead of pretense. What if he shared not just his failures, but his aspirations? He opened his eyes, adrenaline sparking his resolve. Building connections would demand him to strip away layers of pretense, cloaks he had relied upon to shield him from the world. What if, instead, he chose to be an open book? The thought energized him. Could he find the courage to live transparently, inviting others into his vulnerabilities rather than hiding in shame? Suddenly, a sense of urgency swept over him. James had spent too much time in his head. It was time for action. He pivoted and re-entered the house, deciding to seek out Sarah. He needed to share his revelations, his intentions to earn the trust of her family. Confidence surged within him as he acknowledged that this was part of the process of being real, an essential, messy step toward building something worthwhile. In the living room, Sarah sat cross-legged on the couch, engrossed in a book. James's heart raced at the prospect of their forthcoming conversation. He could no longer afford to be the version of himself that cowered in hesitation. Instead, he needed to be the man who was ready to forge forward with unwavering honesty. "Sarah," he started, his voice steady yet vulnerable, "I've been thinking about us, about trust, and about how I can be better for Tommy." The words flowed easily, his newfound clarity coursing through him. Before he could continue, a sudden scream shot through the house, slicing the atmosphere. "Mom! Dad! You need to come quick!" Tommy's voice rang out with panic. James's heart plummeted. The urgency in his son's tone ignited a primal instinct deep within him. He exchanged a knowing glance with Sarah, the two of them leaping up almost in unison. "What happened?" Sarah asked, a tremor lacing her voice. As they dashed toward Tommy's voice, echoes of James's earlier resolution faded momentarily. The path to authenticity was just within reach, but now unforeseen circumstances threatened to derail it. What was happening that required such urgency? An impending crisis loomed, pulling them into an unpredictable world of emotions and fears, redefining the moment of truth James had just begun to grasp. What awaited him on the other side of this unexpected turn would challenge everything he thought he knew about being real. James surged forward, his instincts amplifying the pounding of his heart. The urgency in Tommy's voice had triggered something primal, and he felt an overwhelming need to protect. As they reached the hallway, he noticed Sarah's expression paling. They both understood that something was very wrong. "Tommy!" Sarah called, her voice laced with anxiety as they reached the front door. The cold air slammed against them as they stepped outside, the fading daylight casting shadows that seemed to stretch into the unknown. "Over here!" Tommy shouted from the driveway, his figure silhouetted against the twilight. They ran towards the sound, their breath visible in the chilly air, each step amplifying James's dread. When they arrived in the driveway, the sight that met them threw his world into chaos. There was their car, its engine idling softly, but it was not the vehicle that set him into motion. It was the terrified expression on Tommy's face. "What's going on?" James demanded, but fear had turned his words into a command. I think they're in there," Tommy stammered, eyes wide as they darted toward the rear of the car. James's gaze followed. In an instant, his entire being recoiled. Inside the car, slumped against each other in sleep, were his daughter and grandson. "Sarah, call an ambulance!" James shouted, urgency stripping away any semblance of calm. He approached the car, each step feeling heavier with anxiety. Were they okay? Had anything happened? For a moment, the world around him dulled. He felt like he was moving in slow motion. The scenario conjured up nights he had spent anxiously waiting for them, worrying that a single thought, one wrong turn, or a moment of inattention could lead to disaster. The weight of past failures bore down on him now. Had his little girl trusted him to keep her safe, and by extension, had he let her down? With frantic movements, he opened the door. "Meg, can you hear me?" His voice trembled as he shook her gently. A heavy sigh escaped Meg's lips, and slowly her eyes fluttered open. Confusion swept over her face as she absorbed her surroundings. "Dad, what happened?" "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" he pressed, the urgency in his tone rekindling. Just as he was about to draw her out of the car, he heard a tiny whimper. His grandson stirred slightly and then began to cry. "Mom, he's awake," Tommy said, his voice breaking as panic consumed him. James felt an odd mixture of relief and desperation. At that moment, he understood vulnerability, his and theirs. He needed to stay grounded, to focus on them. "Meg, we need to get you both checked out. Just take a deep breath." His daughter nodded, still dazed but gradually conjuring the strength to pull herself upright. He jumped into action, urging her to exit the vehicle, while Tommy rushed to his brother, unbuckling him from the car seat with trembling hands. As they stood there, James struggled against the tide of emotions, each wave revealing a smothering guilt for what might have happened if he hadn't been there. Was he truly ready to face his own fallibilities if it meant becoming the man they needed? The suppressed questions rose fiercely, and yet he focused on the present, experiencing each breath as a necessary anchor in the storm. "Everything's going to be fine," he reassured them, though the words felt like a promise he was struggling to keep. Just then, sirens rang out in the distance, a beacon against the encroaching darkness. He stood tall despite his uncertainty, embodying the strength he sought to nurture, reassuring himself that facing fear was part of mastering vulnerability. As the ambulance lights illuminated the driveway, James realized this moment was a pivot point, not just a crisis, but a profound embodiment of the truths he longed to confront. This chaos presented not just a challenge, but a realm of possibility, an opportunity to redefine connection. Determined that he would welcome this change, he turned towards Sarah, who stood silently, resolute. "After this, can we talk?" he asked, their eyes locking in a moment of mutual understanding. What would emerge from this crisis could either complicate or clarify his journey toward being real. The possibility gripped him with both excitement and fear. As he welcomed the first responders, he realized that the darkness could no longer bind him. The only way out was through. The true test of courage now loomed ahead. Would he embrace this as a pivotal chapter in earning trust, or would he allow fear to stifle his development? And as the paramedics approached, James took a deep breath, knowing that the real challenge awaited him beyond this moment of chaos. In the aftermath of the ambulance sirens and the chaotic rush of fear, James stood outside his home, watching as paramedics worked quickly to check on Sarah and Tommy. Their fates seemed to hang in the balance, but he'd come to understand that urgency could not drown out the pressing need for connection, something he had desperately sought for years. The paramedics assured them that Sarah and Tommy were fine, just shaken up but healthy. Relief washed over him, a tide releasing the gravel that had settled in his chest. But beneath that relief lurked the tension of what had transpired and the reality that this incident had opened a door he couldn't close. If anything, it had intensified the stakes of the promises he had made. Even as they wrapped up their assessment, James remained vigilant, watching Sarah and Tommy. The warmth he felt had morphed, unfurling into a resolute clarity. This was his chance to prove not just the right to be their father, but to reclaim the identity he'd forsaken. He had to be all in. "Sarah," he began, his voice steady despite the whirlwind. "Let's talk now. No more waiting. We need to confront what happened tonight and let this mark a true turning point." The urgency in his voice cracked the hesitance he had sensed, enveloping the three of them. Sarah's eyes met his, a tempest within them shifting in tandem with their circumstances. "You're right," she replied, her tone firm yet vulnerable, the pain they had endured surfacing anew. "I don't want to live in fear of losing each other again. Let's be uncomfortable and real together." James extended his hand, drawing her toward him, feeling the unbreakable bond of their shared struggle swirl around them. The simplicity of that act, a gesture of connection and unity, felt monumental. Their hands clasped, and he wondered if the grip exceeded mere physicality. Could it signify the beginning of a profound trust? "What do we do next?" Tommy asked, his little voice brimming with innocence yet infinitely wise. The moment he posed that question seemed to embody the essence of their reconciliation, an acknowledgement that they would forge a new narrative as a family. "I think we start by not pretending anymore," James answered, determination solidifying within him. "We'll take this moment and use it as the catalyst for change." He couldn't deny the weight of the evening, nor could he overlook that this moment in the driveway might turn into a foundation where old ghosts could finally take their leave. "What does that mean?" Tommy chirped, looking between them with wonder, yet he absorbed every nuance of their exchange. James knelt to Tommy's height. "It means trusting each other enough to express our fears, our hopes. It means showing up, really showing up for one another. And it means no more hiding behind busy lives or broken promises." Sarah joined him on the ground, kneeling beside Tommy, their united front radiating warmth and strength for the boy. "We can build family dinners into traditions. It won't always be easy, and sometimes we'll disagree, but we need to promise to listen," she added. "Yeah, and I'll help with cooking." Tommy's enthusiasm cracked the somber mood, a needed injection of lightness. They shared a smile, a moment of levity grounding them in an uncertain yet promising reality. "Tommy's right," James chuckled. "Let's make cooking a family affair, something we can all enjoy together. We'll face everything through that lens, cooking, eating, learning, moments that will teach us to grow as a family." And just like that, light began to filter through the shadows of their past. Each commitment felt like a pact forged not just with words, but with the wisdom of experience. Genuine work was required to reunite their fractured hearts. As they rose to their feet, the paramedics finished their evaluation, satisfied that everything was indeed okay. "Remember," one of them said as they packed away their gear, "life can throw curveballs. What matters is how you react." With resolve solidifying around them, James nodded. "We'll remember this. We're ready to face whatever comes next together." In that very moment, he realized his internal transformation had been monumental. He had not merely conquered fear, he had embraced vulnerability. Recognition of this shift ignited a sense of self-worth he hadn't felt in years. James felt a powerful, bittersweet pride swell within him. The chaos of the night had been transformed into a testament of their commitment to one another. It symbolized the promise of a shared future steeped in honesty and connection. As they stood together, hand in hand, they were no longer bound by their past failings, but anchored in the possibilities that lay before them. James had stepped beyond the threshold of uncertainty into a newfound realm of strength. For the first time, he felt wholly confident in who he was: an evolving father, a rebuilding son, a man committed to being authentically present. From that evening forward, every shared dinner, every laugh, every overcoming of conflict would stand as significant milestones on their journey together. James turned towards Sarah and Tommy, eyes glistening with palpable emotion, and collectively they stepped forward into the future, no longer defined by what had been, but fully embracing all that they could choose to become. The moment felt like a welcoming embrace from a long-lost friend. The relationship was fragile, still forming, but full of undeniable potential, waiting to unfold. And so, they ventured ahead, one day at a time, paving a path grounded in love, understanding, and opportunity, together. Now is the time to take action. You need to subscribe now to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories that will inspire you. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support. It makes all the difference. Comment your thoughts and reactions about this ending. What did you feel during their journey? And share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait. Even one more second. Let's spread the message of overcoming together.